Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. We have a super fun video and I feel like this background is a little bit different today. So, also if you have watched my channel, you will know that I am a fan of using what you have, and sometimes that may look different than what I use here, but that just means that we think outside the square and we can make it work. So I'm going to be using some texture paste today. I'm also going to be using some of these Nuvo drops. Now, I am using a blue, a yellow, and a red, but you could also use the Colour Pops, which is just a different version of Nuvo drops. But we could also use something like pixie powders or the Nuvo shimmer powders if you have those. You could also use something like acrylic paints depending on what you have for those. You could also use some re-inkers. That would also work because all we are aiming to do is to colour some of this texture paste. Now, speaking of the paste, there are also heaps and heaps of different brands, and they can be called modelling paste, texture paste, all those things are all very similar and all of them would work for this technique, I'm sure. So sometimes you may have things that are slightly different than what I show here, but it truly is about just using what you have on hand. I am all for purchasing new items, and that definitely gets me inspired sometimes, but I am about using what we have. More importantly, using what we choose to purchase and making sure that we get good value out of it, because if it sits there and we never use it, then that makes our investment in our craft supplies very expensive. So all I've done here is added a tiny little drop of the Nuvo drops to each of these little drops of texture paste. And so I've just put a little blob out, and I am just truly seeing, I really want it to be a light color. So I'm just seeing as I go. Sometimes I add a little bit more. Worst case scenario, if it gets too dark, then you can just add some more texture paste to lighten it up. I am just trying to get a sort of pastel-ish color. But you could do this with whatever colors that you wanted to. You may already have texture paste that are already these colors. Of course, it comes in all sorts of colors, and there's all sorts with glitters and glass beads and all sorts of sort of glitter gels out there. But I am just making my own using some Nuvo drops. Now, I'm just going to shift this over a little bit so I can put my little piece of paper down here. And I'm working on my Waffle Flower stencil mat. And everything is cleaning off this so nicely. I've really taken to this recently. And all I'm doing is using a palette knife, a cheap and cheerful one. That's my favorite one, the plastic one. And I'm just swiping, I guess, brushing it along, and I want all of that texture. I don't want the texture to be too crazy high, but I do want that little build up and then that sort of gradual swish out of the color. And this is just really fun. This is just a cool background, something a little bit different for me, something I was really looking forward to trying out. I didn't want it to be smooth or perfect. You don't need a stencil for this, albeit this would look gorgeous if you put these three colors through a stencil. These are essentially almost the primary colors, so they're all going to mix together nicely and not create mud, depending on the two colors that you put together. But I'm just doing little swipes here and there, and there is no rhyme or reason to how I'm doing this. At this point, I'm not sure whether I was finished, but I have a couple of gaps there that are just need a little bit. So I just put little bits, and that's okay. So they're not all the same size. Every single swipe is different, and I really like that. This is a very unique look that I probably won't be able to replicate, and it will look different every time, which I really like. Now, my full intention here was to just have enough to do one card, but apparently estimating is also not one of my strong points. So I do have enough on here that I wanted to use it on a second card. So I am truly going to do so simple, just a very easy swipe of each color. As I said, these are almost essentially pastel versions of the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And so that means that even if these mix together, two of these three colors mix together, they're going to be just fine. So it didn't matter which order I put them in. You can also do this swiping technique with just ink pads. I actually have a whole video on that, and it looks stunning. So simple. But here I'm going for that extra added texture that the texture paste is going to give me, and trying not to aim for perfection as well. As in not trying to fix up every little lump and bump and just being okay with how it sort of worked out. Now, I am going to move on to creating some focal points for these. I love that set of dies you just saw. That's the Leafy Dies 1 from Pink and Main. I'm using some Sizzix adhesive sheets. These are my new favorite. I think I have some Waffle flower ones to try it as well, so I can't really say favorite, but these are working very, very well. And all I'm doing is putting some tumbled glass ink down onto this scrap piece of paper, which I'll do the die cutting from, and I will cut the leaf that's going to cut the base of these two. You can use these two dies together, you can use them separately, and it really is a lot of fun. I've got this one on a lot of cards, and again, it's all about reusing the things time and time again so that we get good value for money out of our craft supplies. I'm going to do the top layer in some gold mirror cardstock, and I also put some Sizzix adhesive on the back of that one too. It just makes life a little bit easier. You most certainly don't have to do it at all. So all you do is pull them both out. Then I'm going to take the innards out of this one. I have done another project where I actually used the innards of this for something else, but in this case I didn't think about it, so I was just getting the gold, and I will put this around the outline of this leaf, and just so stunning, so simple. And honestly, you can go to town on this, whether you want to do rainbow, you can go, as I said, I've used it a lot. Then I'm going to cut down the base just a little bit, and I'm going to use the Tim Holtz guillotine trimmer, just because I also think this may damage my little line trimmer thing that I have. I wasn't sure, but that's kind of the best one. Now here's the two finished ones. I don't think I've showed you the two finished backgrounds. Of course they look very similar to when they dry. This is a very flexible paste when it's dry, so things sort of don't crack and crumble. If these were to go through the mail, I wouldn't be afraid that it would sort of end up in a crumbly biscuit mess when they opened the card. And then the reason that I die cut the leaf right out of the center of that gold is because I wanted to use it to create a matting layer, which always works well, and it means that I can just take off the adhesive from the back here, the leftover adhesive, so to speak, and this will adhere it to my card nicely. I'm going to use some of the Paper Rose All Occasions sentiments. I'm keeping these cards very simple. I was actually only intending to make one as well. That's why the video is a little bit longer, because I go ahead and make both cards for you. I am loving using some pre-printed sentiments in the last year or so. I sort of gave myself permission, I guess, to go ahead and use the pre-printed ones. I had it in my head that it was always fun to stamp them out, but I enjoy both, and so today is pre-printed. This could go in several places. I think lots of that gorgeous background still shows. The sentiment is small enough that it doesn't take over the background, but it's big enough that you can absolutely read it and see the purpose of the card. But just really easy, gorgeous, stunning texture in the background. Moving on to card number 2. Again, I'm going to keep this one fairly simple. But I found these dies. Now, I'm not even sure if they're still available, but in the back, I had already die cut these out of, I don't know what. I think it's on watercolor paper, and maybe I've added some Distress Oxide inks to the front and then just didn't like it, so I put them in the back of the packaging, and then I thought, yeah, these kind of roughly go with what I've got here, so I'm just going to peel off the backing. They already had, I think this is a stick-it adhesive on the back, and I cut a couple of them in half, and I'm just going to create essentially a little floral border down that side, just as a little bit of extra added dimension, a little bit of something going on down the side. You could use a piece of lace, you could use some, a die cut edge would be really nice, but I just decided that since I had these in the package, then I would use them up. And that's how I honestly find I use up my scraps much better if they are stored in the back of the packaging that they kind of coordinate with, so if I do some die cuts and the extras, I store them in the back of the packaging of that die cut rather than putting them in a scraps pile, because that way when I come to use that die again, I will not remember that I have put some in my scraps pile, a month ago. I will not remember, and so it's sort of like a little surprise each time, and I can either see that there is some spears in the back already pre-cut, ready to go, or I need to die cut some more or stamp or whatever the case may be. Now I'm using that Spotlight Sayings to stamp the Feel Better Soon. I'm in a very twiny mood in my card making at the moment, and I'm loving adding this little bit of extra added touch. Just a few little strands. I think I had 3 left over on my desk, so that's all we really have left there. And then I use the Tim Holtz set to stamp this on, and I'm going to pop it up on a vellum layer just to help it pop off the background a little bit. Put it up on some foam tape. This is a very, very simple card, but I think really effective, and I just really wanted to make sure that you could see as much of the background as I could, and also get a feeling for the texture. I think it's nice to be able to even feel that texture in the background that we created. So I hope that you have enjoyed my cards for today. I certainly had so much fun creating these ones. It was a little bit different for me, and almost a little bit out of my comfort zone, because there is no perfection really when you're getting to smoothing the paste and the texture paste and working with it. So I hope that you've enjoyed this one too. I hope this has inspired you. As per usual, I will leave links to any of the supplies that I have used in today's video down below. If you just look down below this video on YouTube, you'll find them. I also have links to the Buy Me a Coffee in case you would like to support my channel. But other than that, I will see you in the next video. Thanks, bye!